So this video is going to cover the final exam. Please, please, please watch this video in its entirety before you ask me any questions or email me any questions about the final exam, because this should answer every single possible question you could come up with. So, first off, the big questions I usually get. A, when is it due? If you are in my Monday, Wednesday class, it is due on the 12th, which is a Friday. If you are in my Tuesday, Thursday class, it's due on the 13th, which is a Saturday. If any of you have some pressing concerns where you would need an extension by a day or two, talk to me, email me, let me know, and I may be able to give you that. But otherwise, 12th, 13th, depending on which class. All right, it's going to be submitted on Blackboard through SafeAssign. I'm going to go over how you actually do that in a second, so hold on to that question because I'll be answering it at the end. It is a take-home essay. What's going to happen is you'll be critiquing a speech from a movie and a TED Talk. So it's two separate questions, but you'll be submitting them as one document. So that's essentially what it's going to end up being. As far as the length and grading, this is another important question that always comes up. So length. There's no specific length for each question. So remember, there's two specific questions that you will be answering. However, in the entirety of the exam, it should come out to about 1,100 to 1,500 words. I have had students that have gone over 1,500. That's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. But anything lower than 1,100, you're really not answering the question in a meaningful way, and it will be marked down. So just keep in mind, hitting at least 1,100 is the bare minimum. Probably more than that would be best. Grading. So a couple of things I'll be looking for. One, your ability to understand the concepts, which is really important. Your ability to apply them, because obviously you've been applying them in doing your own work, and you also kind of applied an analysis a little bit in the midterm. How you develop the argument that you're going to be making, because you will be actually critiquing the speeches, you know, if you think they're effective, if you think they're ineffective, and your writing ability. So in the speeches, I haven't really been critiquing grammar, though I have noticed some students definitely have some issues with that. So I would recommend starting on this ahead of time if you know you have grammatical or syntactical issues in your writing, and going to the writing center, which is in the BT building. So set up an appointment. They usually get busy around this time. Or send it to me and I can look at it. That's another thing too. So if you are ever confused, or you're working, or you're taking some notes on this and you just, you know, not sure if you're doing it right, send it to me. By all means, I will look at it for you and, you know, kind of give you feedback on it. I have no problem with that. So the sooner you get started on this, the better I will be able to give you a feedback. All right, submission. Like I said, this is going to be in two different parts, but what you're going to do is be submitting this as an essay. And it said it earlier in the PowerPoint, but I didn't stress it. This will be an essay, an actual essay. Sometimes people have submitted like bullet points, or they've submitted something like an outline. It's not. This is an essay. This should be submitted as one document, and it needs to be a Word document. So typically students will answer the two questions separately. So they'll answer question 1, then they'll skip to another page, answer question 2, but it's one document, and it should be a Word file that's actually submitted. Okay, the essay's actual format, I'm just going to go over what I'm looking for. For some of you, this may be basic, especially if you've taken ENC 1101 and 1102. This is not to insult anyone. I just want to be very clear as to what I want, and particularly for those students who have less writing experience, I want to be clear on how you actually set up an essay. So, for the introduction, here's what you need to do. Identify first the speech that you're using. So if you're doing the movie speech, that first part, identify which movie it's from. If you're doing the TED Talk part, then you would identify what TED Talk. Give a very brief summary of the context, audience, and purpose of the speaker. So kind of basically, what's the rhetorical situation? Kind of hit on that, right? Why are they talking? What's the purpose? What's going on? What's the situation? So anything that would be relevant. This is not the point at which you should be adding a lot of words so that you can hit the 1,100. So don't spend a lot of time on this. A very brief summary is all you need. And then, of course, preview the concepts that you're analyzing, and then your overall take on the effectiveness of the speech. You can say the speech is ineffective, by the way. It's totally up to you, but I just need you to hit on these things. You know, I'm going to be talking about this speech. Essentially, the speaker was talking about this, and this is what's going on. I'm going to be using these concepts, and, you know, I thought that these concepts really helped to make the speech very effective or ineffective. That's basically what you're going to be doing. Okay, the body of the speech. So, a couple of things you want to keep in mind. Obviously, the concepts that you're being applied. So you're going to have to pick some concepts, and I'll talk more specifically about what specifically you will be using depending on which question it is. But you do need to tell me the concepts, and then you also need to define the concept. This is going to be where you are showing me your knowledge. Now, please make sure that you're not like copying and pasting what I said from another video. I would like to hear, what is your version of the concept? What do you think it actually is? The other thing, give a specific but brief example of how the concept is being utilized. So sometimes I'll have students who will say, you know, oh, he was using ethos and it really worked. Well, how? Prove that to me. What did the person say? What did the person do? How is this actually ethos? You can use quotes. That's perfectly fine, but if you're going to start putting in major block quotes to fill up space, that's not going to work. So really just tell me what's going on, a quote if necessary, or just briefly summarize. Next thing, discuss the effectiveness of the concept. So did it work? Did it not work? And why, right? So that's also kind of what we've been doing throughout this entire course, is really utilizing these concepts that speakers use and making sure that we're doing them well. And then how the concept connects to the speaker's goal or concept or context of the speech, excuse me. You know, so if the person is using, say, ethos, and they're trying to, you know, make sure that they seem like a speaker who's really kind and caring, and maybe they're doing a speech that's on, say, education, and really coming across as someone who's kind and caring if they're speaking to students is important to that, right? Because they want the students to see them in that way, and that's their goal as a speaker. And then, of course, the other thing, make sure you highlight the concept in bold just so I can clearly identify that that is the concept that you're using. So here I have an example. The speaker effectively used anaphora. Highlight anaphora, you know, bold it, put it in a color, whatever it is. But this is what I want you to do in the body of the essay. And, of course, the conclusion. Summarize the argument, review your thesis, conclude the section of the paper, and you want to do this for each separate question that you have. So that is what I'm looking for as far as the actual format of the essay. All right, now on to the actual questions themselves. I've only briefly touched on them, so I really want to give you specifics on what it is that you need to answer. So the first part, like I said, you're going to be critiquing a movie speech. So I'm going to give you a couple of clips. I'll show you what those are in a second. And you need to discuss how the speaker is using all three of the rhetorical proofs: ethos, pathos, and logos. So what you need to do in the actual answer itself is, of course, like I said, define the concept. So what are each of the rhetorical proofs? Give example of how the speaker is using them, preferably more than one, because in some of these clips they're used multiple times. And let me also say, in all the clips they are all used. So if you're looking at a clip and you're saying, I can't find, say, logos, use another clip or come talk to me and we can figure out, you know, what you're missing here, but all of them have them. And then analyze its effects on the audience or the purpose of the rhetorical proof being used. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. So first off, these are some of the clips. There's 3 different movies. Elizabeth, Weir, Marshall, Gladiator, Thank You for Not Smoking. These links, by the way, are all on the exam, so it's not like you have to get into this video and like somehow try and copy and paste this, which you actually couldn't do anyways, but whatever. It's all on the exam, which I'm going to show you in a second. Now, an example. So this is kind of what I want you to replicate, right? So the speaker, you discussed his upbringing, mentioning that he grew up poor and was raised by just his mother. This is an example of ethos, so I'm defining the concept. I've brought up an example, which is the speaker's character or credibility, so defined it. By discussing his modest background, the speaker creates himself to be an everyman. He is someone who can relate to the crowd and had to work to get to his current position. This is effective, right? So then analyze the effectiveness, because he shows the crowd that he's relatable and he understands their concerns. So this is just a small portion. Remember, you would want to do all 3 of the rhetorical proofs. So you get to pick which movie of the 4 that I've listed, and then you need to analyze the rhetorical proofs there, defining the concept, saying how the speaker used it, and analyzing it. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, part 2, so this is the second question. You are going to do a rhetorical analysis of a TED Talk. So, first, you have to pick a TED Talk. These are the TED Talks. Again, these links are actually going to be in the exam themselves, but these are ones that you will be able to pick from, and they're all really, really good ones. Now, once you've actually picked it, what do you have to do? What you're going to be doing is analyzing the success or failure of the speech in persuading the audience, and you will have to use 4 of the following course concepts in order to do this. So, here's the one thing, and I want to make this clear. You have to use 2 from each of the category, and again, this chart is also on the final exam. So, I could, for instance, pick, Tolman's model of argument, Tillman's model of argument, and let's say engaging the audience in this category, and then I could pick non-factual sources and arrangement in the second category. Sorry that I keep doing that. So you can't pick 4 from here or 4 from here. It has to be 2 from here, 2 from here. Now, if you want to pick more than 4, by all means, but it has to be at least 4, 2 from each category. I didn't want people picking out just the easy things like engaging the audience, non-factual sources, those sorts of things. The other thing, too, you'll notice there are no rhetorical proofs in here. So you did this in the first question. You will not be addressing rhetorical proofs. Just to kind of briefly review some of these concepts. So remember, Tolman's model of argument, that you're probably pretty familiar with by now since we're doing the argumentation speeches. But obviously, claim is your argument, data, I have them out of order here, is your evidence, and warrant is connecting them. The persuasive route, central or peripheral, that of course is when you have an audience that's either for or against the speech. If they are in the central route, that means they're against your topic, and you'll mainly be using logos and a little bit of ethos, like we saw in the newsroom speech. In the peripheral route, the audience is mostly for it. You'll use a lot of pathos, like we saw in the volunteering for the Special Olympics speech. Engaging, involving the audience, these are things like doing activities, pulling the audience, asking a question, those sorts of things. Rhetorical style, so anaphora, epistrophe, antithesis, alliteration. I have a whole video, so I'm not going to really go over that. Rhetorical canon on style, so remember the oral or clear style. So clear obviously is clarity, lack of jargon. Oral is that you seem very conversational, using personal pronouns, things like that. Rhetorical situation, triangle, you should be familiar with this one, but again, that's probably from the very first video that I did. Arrangement are the structures that we've talked about: Monroe's, problem, cause, solution, statement of reasons. Non-factual sources, use of narratives, visuals, testimony, and examples. And if you have any questions on any of these concepts, you can go back to my videos, and of course you feel free to talk to me. Now, directions for this, I've kind of already said this, but just to basically go over it again, make sure when you're naming the concepts that you picked, you explain what the concept means, then apply it to the speech, and also analyze its effectiveness. Now remember, you can say the speaker's ineffective. There's nothing wrong with that. Also note that just saying, if you discuss, say, delivery, right? He did well, not appropriate. You have to be specific. You have to give me an example. You have to connect this back to the speech. So I'm really looking for a much higher order level of analysis here. Again, if you are ever confused or feel like maybe you're not doing this right, please send this to me or talk to me so that we can go over it together. I have no problem giving you feedback, but you do have to start on this in advance so that I'll be able to actually give you feedback in good time so that you'll be able to submit it. Okay, so this is Blackboard. This is what it should now look like. You'll notice here Safe Assignments and Safe Assignment Tutorial has popped up. Before, all that was really here is my grades. And just FYI, on my grades, make sure if you haven't already done so, please look and see where you are participation-wise. I'm going to be updating those grades relatively soon, so just keep that in mind. Okay, Safe Assignment. So you'll click on that. And what will happen is the copy of the exam that you saw is here. So everything I put in that PowerPoint is just copied and pasted from that. So those links I mentioned are here, the TED Talks, that chart is here, all of that's here. So what you're going to do is scroll down, you'll hit View Complete. And then what you'll do, so some people like will copy and paste everything into this little box right here. You can do that as a backup. Or actually no, because I don't think that'll go through Safe Assign. So ignore what I just said. What you do have to do is go to Browse, and then you will pick your actual document once you've finished it and saved it. So I'll just like click on this as an example. And it should attach in a second. There we go. And you'll hit submit. And then it should submit. Okay, submitted successfully. So as long as you get that little green tab up here, you're done, you're good. That's literally all it takes to submit the exam. So it does have to be submitted on Safe Assign. For those who are not familiar with Safe, back if you would like to get it.